Hey, what's up guys, TechTime here, and this is a look at the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus 6 months later. So this one has been out for a little bit over 6 months, and here's my thoughts on the iPhone 15. Now it's halfway through its cycle, and the iPhone 16, you can just say that it's right around the corner because those next 6 months will be up very quickly. So basically, Apple did change a couple of things from the iPhone 14, and one of the biggest changes is you may not notice it, but it is in the design itself. So beginning with this kind of frost finish to it, instead of giving you that glossy material that does catch fingerprints and can get smudged easily over time, this is definitely a much better improved version. And even if you look around the corner where the volume up and down is, the silent switch, or even the power button, you'll see that it does have these rounded edges that not only provide a better grip, but makes this phone feel different. So it doesn't give you these sharp edges that you'll see in the iPhone 14 or previous generation iPhones. So that's definitely something to, in my opinion, to brag about as far as change. And 6 months later, I've still enjoyed it. On the bottom though is where kind of the biggest, you can say, controversy change, but you do get USB-C for better or for worse, in my opinion. USB-C does have more advantages than it does have disadvantages. However, again, this is my opinion, the Lightning port had an advantage of not breaking as quick as the USB-C port breaks. So keep that in mind. As far as the display goes, on whether you get the iPhone 15 or the 15 Plus, you won't be really disappointed. It does have a high resolution OLED display that does give you 1000 nits of high brightness mode. And you can even reach up to 2000 nits of peak brightness, which would help out in watching your HDR content. So brightness on this phone is no problem at all. Outdoor viewing conditions, even in harsh sunlight, is really good. So thumbs up for Apple for making that happen. And on the newer iPhones, you do get the addition of a dynamic island, which we will cover later on in a little bit. However, if I were to be kind of nitpicky and say the disappointing thing about the display would be the fact that it lacks a higher refresh rate. So we've seen a lot, and I hate to make these comparisons, but we do see a lot of these mid-range and even cheap Android phones that give you 90 hertz or even 120 hertz as far as your peak brightness, as far as your refresh rate goes, which is silly that Apple's not giving us a higher refresh rate on these iPhones, especially when they cost a premium, right? They may not be their pro model phones, but still, they're not cheap. Okay. Another thing that I want to say is that the bezels are fairly there on the iPhone 15 and the 15 Plus, but they're not going to bother anybody. They're all right. The dynamic island, on the other hand, just gives you the new addition instead of giving you that kind of big notch that goes around the top. The dynamic island is a little bit more manageable, and some people may get annoyed by it. I found it easily to get used to, so I didn't really have a problem with that. Another category that Apple updated and still is fantastic to this day is the dual camera setup. So you get a 48 megapixel main sensor at f1.6 aperture, and you also get a 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor, and the camera system works and it's integrated really well. So taking videos, and by the way, this phone does take video up to 4K at 60 frames per second and as low as 24 frames per second, and if you want, you can switch to 1080p at up to 240 frames per second, or even go as low as 30 frames per second. And picture quality, video quality, I don't really need to discuss it a lot. If you know, you know. The iPhone just takes fantastic pictures overall, right? And it does have this kind of, I don't want to say optical illusion, but it does have a 2x kind of almost a telephoto lens. It does use the main sensor to kind of help process a telephoto picture for you. I don't know if you use telephoto, it's there for you. The portrait mode, I'm not really a big fan of when it comes to iPhone portraits. I still think that it still needs work in my book. I'd rather just use the standard bokeh that you'll find on your main sensor. Obviously, in portrait mode, you can get creative with the studio light and things like that, but I still would rather use the main sensor any time of the day. And even when it comes to nighttime photography, the kind of night mode on here works really well. So everything about this phone is integrated very well. As far as the performance 6 months later, I haven't really seen any slowdowns, even with software updates. It works flawlessly, right? Opening apps, opening the messaging app, going through browsing web and going through your social media, things like that, and even playing heavy demanding games to this day is fantastic. This phone does have 6 gigabytes of RAM standard, 128 gigabyte of storage, and you do get the A16 Bionic chip from the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So it's not the A17, but still works really well even to this day, right? If I were to complain, I would say that the iPhone 15 does not have as good of a battery life as the iPhone 15 Plus. So the 15 only has a 3349 milliamp hour battery, and it doesn't really have as good of a charging rate or as fast as a charging rate as a lot of these other Android phones. So if you're an iPhone user and you have the iPhone 13, then this may be a upgrade for you. But if you want my opinion, if you have the iPhone 13, I would wait until the iPhone 16 comes out and get the iPhone 15. I think that would be a smarter route to take. So with that being said, I mean, this is just my my thoughts on this phone 6 months later. Let me know what you think about the iPhone 15 Plus or 15. If you enjoyed it, leave a thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and I will definitely catch you guys in the next one.